That's a good question, yeah. I thought we were, okay, that's fine. Sung was just asking, because one of the things which may be unusual is the fact that Sung is speaking in English today. Although he's clearly clever, clearly able to speak Korean. So maybe this is the first question we should address first. Why are we both speaking in English today?
It's just to make it easier and more comfortable for us to have a conversation, because it's a talk between us. That's the reason why, actually. But I think in my work, I use both languages, and sometimes 3 or 4 different languages, and subtitles. For example, in Washing Bread and Corn, this information the story that I tell is a story that if I show it in certain countries, it's not something that you know at all. And if you show it to a certain generation, some generation know about this story and some generation don't know about this story. So what kind of story or what kind of language or what kind of information do you tell to who is always the context that I work under.
In terms of translation, and in the way that then maybe one step further, translation of culture, of different contexts, and also of different generations, different experiences.
He raised his arms. Cold wind from the door blew into his armpits. He breathed in shortly, and he breathed out longer to keep the heat inside of him. Bring rice, he ordered the mother. We do not have rice. We only have kamini. Bring the kamini then. The men were hungry. One man's hunger might have been silent, but the bellies of many men could be.
Yes. For example, I think I use 2 subtitles here, left and right, and the way I wrote both texts, so it's not really a translation. So I was thinking about, so they're both, they have a poetic rhythm. It's a poetic text, I think, and you think about how many words should fit in, because it's a limited. It's kind of like a poem, like where you have lines and a page, and how many words should be in one line, in each stanza. So but it's also spoken at the same time. And which language do you have to speak when these subtitles are running through? So I'm interested in this play, which is very different from now. That's why I get confused, because I have to talk to you, but I feel like I'm still talking to this person at the same time. And anyway, so there's a delay in this kind of conversation. Also, Rilke, he was living in Prague, for example, and he was writing in German. And this sort of situation is not necessarily contemporary, I think. It's a situation that but they have this kind of duality going on in terms of language, and which language do you use to be public. For example, in Germany, there are a lot of Korean immigrants, which were the descendants of the immigrants who went there as miners and nurses. In New York City, there are a lot of, and of course there are many different professions, but the New York delis and laundromats are often owned by Korean people. Nowadays, you see a lot of Koreans in Berlin or New York, but the reason why they come are different. So I was interested in these, depending on the period, what moves people from one place to another, and then when they have the offspring, such as my niece, then what does it mean for her to be there, or, you know.
And then it makes me think of the theatre, of course, in the sense that your project coming up at Asian Arts Theatre. So I know, because I kind of, well, it'd be interesting to hear from you in what way you think that the theatre would be a different space to an exhibition space, and how these elements like film, music, maybe, and performance, of course, will come together.
The performance space that I'm used to is because it happens in museum, but it's an open space and there's a lot of freedom for the audience to, like, for example, installation, you can get close to the object in case you examine what kind of materials that you use, the choice of the material, what this means, and all these, scale. But I was interested in theater, proscenium space, like this kind of space where you are framed by certain things. You are framed by the architecture, and often audience don't move around. So person from that space will only have this perspective. So they can, if I face this way, they will only see my ear the whole time. So I'm interested in this kind of hierarchy one has. Like, even already in the audience seat, there's a hierarchy.
And I guess the other thing that's different is the issue of time. So in the sense, whilst as a viewer in an installation, you can choose where you go to physically, but you can also choose to stay as long as you want. But when you're sitting in, well, of course, one can always leave in a theatre, but of course it's a different time setting, if you like.
I think there is always, I think there's a tension between theater and theater world and the art world sometimes. Of course, in theater you can leave too, but it takes a lot of effort to leave because you have to say, you have to go through all these people to leave. So, like a lot of times when you're leaving the theater, people are like this, and then they just they don't want to be shown that they're leaving. And in our space, it's very easy to leave, and you can be anonymous. And I think in a way, the theater space in that way is more interesting because it has in that way, I think people actually have more power. Right? So there's all this tension going on between the audience and the theater maker, and I think that's one of the interesting things about theater is that if you want to show anything live or real in theater, people don't believe it. If you bring, like, if I brought like a person here and then can you stand up and then you just 이쪽으로 오세요. 그래서 if I show this person as if this person is a real person, people don't believe that is real. People think it's artificial that I did that. So the only thing that is real about theater space is the artificiality, and they make that very, very present. And I think that's an interesting context to work in. Whereas I feel like sometimes in the art world, you show this is gold. There's no question that this is gold. The artist is questioning the value or the truth or reality of it, but at first, the context is that it is actually gold. If I show gold here in the theater, nobody would actually believe that it's gold in the theater world. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Even if I show the gold, real gold, yeah.